What is up, guys? Thank you so much for being here. So today I just want to talk about this little lens right here. This is the Sony 35 f1.8, and I want to talk about why I think that this is legitimately one of the best lenses out there, if not the best lens for the Sony APS-C cameras when it comes to like cinematic video and B-roll. First off, let's just go ahead and talk about the build of the lens and like what it is. So it's a 35mm prime lens, which means that it can't zoom in or out. It's just one fixed focal length. It's got a maximum aperture of f1.8 and a minimum of f22, as well as OSS, which is optical steady shot, which helps stabilize your footage. Comes with a lens cap and a lens hood. As you can see, it's just a super small, compact lens. It only weighs 5.5 ounces or 154 grams. Also, the filter thread size is 49mm, which is pretty dang small, but it's not really a big deal because you can just throw on a bunch of step-up rings, which you can buy in a pack for like less than 10 bucks. So that's what I do, and it doesn't really cause me any issues. And the minimum focus distance on this guy is about 11.88 inches according to their website, which, I mean, it's basically a foot, which isn't terrible, but it also isn't like super good. But considering the 35mm is closer to a 50mm on a full frame, that's kind of like the view that you're gonna get, then like 1 foot is really not bad. Now that we got all the basic info out of the way, I want to talk about like the pros and cons, and we'll save the cons for after. There's not really many, but we'll talk about all the pros and how I think like each one of those pros helps make this lens so good for B-roll and cinematic footage. None of these are in any particular order of importance or anything, but the first thing is this little guy is really sharp. And so obviously if you're trying to make nice looking B-roll and cool cinematic videos, for the most part, it's gonna look better if it's nice and sharp. Now, obviously there's some situations where you're going for a different kind of look and you just don't want it to be super sharp. But for the most part, I mean, the sharper the lens, the better, because it just gives it that higher quality look. Next, which is one of my favorite things about this lens, is the fact that it does open up to f1.8, which just allows so much more light to get to the sensor. And so if you're wanting to like do any kind of B-roll in low light or even at nighttime, then you have to have something that's lower, like at the least f2.8. But to me, you want to be closer to like f1.8, f1.4 to get like that really nice looking footage. Because otherwise it's just going to be too grainy. As soon as you start getting into any low light situations or filming at night, it's just going to be too grainy. Unless, once again, that's the look you're going for. And to go along with the fact that it's f1.8 is the fact that it has really nice creamy bokeh. And what that is that's when you blur out the background, and so you can't do that if you don't get a shallow depth of field, and you can't get a shallow depth of field if you don't go down to like f1.8 or just something like a lower aperture like that. What that does is it creates that cinematic look because it separates your subject from the background, and so that'll create that creamy background. And also if it's nighttime and you've got lights in the background, it'll create all those nice bokeh balls, which are when the lights just kind of look round and creamy. And then unless you're trying to film a scene that looks really hectic and all that, you're not really gonna want camera shake. You're gonna want everything to be really smooth, and that helps, again, give it that cinematic, nice look. Makes it look more high quality and professional than when you have like little hand jitters and shakes in your footage. It just doesn't look as professional and high quality. And so the fact that this has OSS, which is that optical steady shot that stabilizes the footage, it just makes a big difference. It's not a huge difference, but it is a difference. And then when you pair that with like my camera, which is a Sony a6600, and that has stabilization as well. So the more stabilization you have, the better. So if you've got a camera that has stabilization, and then the lens has stabilization, and then let's just go even further, because I own a gimbal, and say I put this whole setup on my gimbal, and then the fact that it's so small and lightweight, which is another perk, because for one, it just doesn't weigh down your camera bag, but then when you put it on a gimbal, it just works that much better, because if you put a heavy setup on a gimbal, it's a little bit more like difficult for the gimbal to do its job, and it might not work as well. It'll still work great, but it just might not be as smooth in certain like angles or certain situations as having a lighter setup. So when you combine like a stabilized camera, a stabilized lens on a gimbal and a small lightweight setup, then it just creates like a super smooth, nice video. And I mean, you can sprint with it, you can do all kinds of things, and it's gonna look way smoother, 100 times smoother than it would like just handheld, unstabilized. And as you can see by my own B-roll, it does make a huge difference. And then on top of all those things we mentioned, it is a Sony lens, and I'm using it with a Sony APS-C camera. And so the autofocus is just gonna be optimized, because anytime you use a native lens with that same brand camera, I mean, the lens is built for that camera. So the autofocus is gonna be the fastest and the snappiest and the most accurate compared to like non-native lenses. Although there's tons of other good lenses that also will have almost just as good of autofocus, but you're gonna have the best autofocus from a native lens. And as for cons, if you wanna talk about cons, there's not really many, but there's some things about this lens that other ones are better, particularly the Sigma 30mm f1.4. That one has things that are not as good as this one, but I'll just mention the cons, and I'll do like a full review or like comparison video between the two in the future. But this one is f1.8 and that one is f1.4, so it's just gonna be slightly better in low light than this guy. This one, despite being very sharp, is actually not quite as sharp as the 30mm Sigma, because that one is legitimately like almost the sharpest lens for APS-C. I think only the Sigma 56 is sharper. And then this guy is gonna be about $100 or so more expensive than that. But despite those few cons, the pros outweigh it, and that's why, in my opinion, this is worth the extra 100-something bucks over the Sigma, particularly if you're gonna be doing B-roll and making cool videos, because the fact that it does have the optical steady shot to stabilize the footage, with the Sigma doesn't. And it is a native lens, so the autofocus is gonna be slightly better than the Sigma. And the fact that it is significantly smaller and lighter weight than the Sigma, so it's gonna do better on your gimbal, and even just for like panning, like handheld video when you're doing like a panning shot. I mean, the lighter it is, the easier it is to control, and so you're gonna have smoother footage. So for all those reasons that I mentioned, in my opinion, this is like the best overall lens for cool B-roll and cinematic footage if you're just gonna have one lens that does the majority of that kind of stuff for you. Now, obviously there are better lenses out there that are more expensive, like the Sony 16-55. I mean, that's a zoom lens. You're gonna get like a lot more looks out of it because you're gonna get the wider end of things as well as like a more telephoto. But this guy is right in the middle, and it does better in low light, and it's lighter weight. And so again, it's just gonna do better on a gimbal, and it's just overall better to just carry around with you and pull this little guy out whenever you need some quick B-roll and a quick cinematic shot. This is the guy that I'm gonna go to. Well, that's my opinion on this lens. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And one thing I forgot to mention is the price. So last time I checked on Amazon, which is typically the cheapest place to find lenses. I mean, once in a while, if you find it used somewhere else, it might be cheaper or the same price. But anyways, on Amazon, this was 423 bucks. So sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less, but that's what it was the last time I checked. And if you are interested in picking this lens up for yourself, which obviously I highly recommend, I went ahead and put a link in the description down below, so it's kind of a convenience to you guys. All you have to do is click on that. It'll take you straight to Amazon where you can buy it. But also it helps out my channel because I get a small percentage from Amazon and it's at no cost to you. So I would really appreciate that. And if you guys enjoy these kinds of videos, like anything that has to do with photography or videography, lens reviews, any kind of camera gear, just any of that stuff. If you like that, then definitely go ahead and hit the subscribe button because I'm gonna be putting out a lot more like content moving forward. And last but not least, do me a huge favor and hit the subscribe button. It's like a really small, simple thing that you can do that really helps out my channel. So again, I would highly appreciate that. But thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.